Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of aligned scheduling and why your future business is currently being suffocated by your past routine.
Right. And we're setting an agenda today that's really critical for anyone serious about transitioning from an operational bottleneck to a fully scalable enterprise.
Exactly. Our core mission today centers entirely on the internal strategy notes, some micro-stories we've pulled, and the tactical communication drafts focusing on the ThriveTime aligned scheduling protocol. We're looking at internal documentation, direct client emails, short-form video scripts, and really the broader strategic framework that underpins this entire concept.
And the objective here isn't just to review basic time management theory. I mean, we're aiming to fundamentally restructure how you view your daily operations.
That's the correct operational baseline, because we're operating from a very specific fundamental law today. It's pulled straight from the strategy text. The quote is, "Your future business cannot grow on yesterday's schedule. Update your time to match who you are becoming."
Which is, look, that isn't just a motivational suggestion, it's a strict structural imperative.
Yeah.
When we analyze the data and the actual case studies of founders who successfully scale, the defining metric isn't exclusively their capital access or, their product market fit.
Right.
It's the strict alignment of their daily schedule with their future objectives. If you're holding on to the exact schedule you utilized when you were purely an employee or when your business was merely an abstract concept, you're actively suppressing your own growth metrics.
It's the equivalent of attempting to run a modern, high-performance operating system on completely obsolete hardware.
The system physically cannot process the demand. It just crashes.
I hear that, but let's play devil's advocate right out of the gate here. A lot of founders would argue that they are simply in a transition phase. They'd say, I'm working my 9 to 5, I'm building my business at night, so of course my schedule looks like a hybrid mess right now. Why is maintaining that stagnant routine a guaranteed failure?
Because the transition phase is often just a prolonged excuse for operational cowardice. The dissonance between your stated ambition and your daily execution is the primary failure point for emerging founders. You say you want to leave your current obligations to build something scalable, yet your Tuesday morning looks identical to how it looked 3 years ago.
Right. There's no evolutionary leap in your routine to match the evolutionary leap you're demanding from your career.
Exactly. We have to treat the schedule not as a passive list of tasks, but as a rigid structural container. If the container is built for a 9 to 5 employee, a thriving independent business literally cannot fit inside it.
Because the friction between what you verbally prioritize and what your calendar proves you actually execute will eventually result in critical burnout.
Absolute burnout.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to look at the first major concept from the strategy notes, which is the schedule as a mirror. The documentation states explicitly, your schedule is a mirror. When we say that, we're not talking about a reflection of your busy work. We're talking about a stark, unforgiving diagnostic of your actual practiced reality versus your theoretical ambition.
Right. When you look at your calendar, you aren't just seeing time slots. You're looking at a direct readout of your operational mindset. It reflects your true priorities, your actual future trajectory, and your definitive direction. A mirror doesn't negotiate with what's standing in front of it.
It just shows the empirical truth.
Exactly. You might tell yourself, your team, your investors that your startup is your absolute highest priority. But if we audit your schedule and see that the business only receives the exhausted, leftover 90 minutes at the very end of your day.
After you've given your peak cognitive energy to a corporate role you claim to be outgrowing.
Precisely. The mirror reveals the truth. Your priority isn't the business. Your priority is maintaining the safety of the known. The schedule is either an engine actively generating momentum toward your future, or it's a massive, heavy anchor tethered directly to your past.
But let's look at the reality of a 50-hour workweek. If a founder is working a highly demanding corporate job, their exhaustion isn't just a mindset issue, it's a physiological reality. How do they realistically reconcile this mirror principle when their container genuinely is overflowing?
Well, this leads us directly to what the notes call the fallacy of finding time. You hear it constantly in these strategy sessions. Founders say, I just need to find the time to work on the business.
Which is a massive operational red flag.
It really is. It reveals a fundamentally flawed premise. It assumes that time is somehow hidden within your current outdated routine, just waiting to be stumbled upon like loose change in a couch. It treats time as an accident rather than a highly guarded asset. You don't find time to build a scalable enterprise.
Right, you can't just squeeze profound strategic execution into random 15-minute gaps between your legacy habits. That approach guarantees the business remains a secondary reactive hobby. It's an entirely passive posture.
Passive is the exact word. Finding time implies you're waiting for permission from your old life to initiate your new one. You're waiting for the corporate role to magically pause or for your existing chaotic habits to spontaneously organize themselves.
We need to transition from this passive failure point to the active solution outlined in the strategy, which is architecting space.
Architecting space is an entirely different operational paradigm. It's an active, structural overhaul of your baseline existence. An architect doesn't just walk onto a chaotic plot of land and hope to locate a pre-built structure. They clear the site, they pour a new foundation, and they dictate exactly where the load-bearing walls go.
When you architect space, you're forcefully tearing down the old framework that kept you stagnant. You're acknowledging that the old schedule is actively hostile to your new goals.
And you're engineering a new structural framework that explicitly supports scale. It requires making very difficult, highly objective decisions about what you will no longer tolerate in your daily operational flow.
And that structural overhaul isn't just theoretical. The internal notes provide a highly detailed micro-story that perfectly illustrates this dynamic. We're looking at a specific client profile from the ThriveTime strategy documents. This was a client who explicitly stated her objective was to exit her 9-to-5 within a single 12-month period. That was the documented vision.
Yes.
But when the team actually audited her data, when we looked at the raw output of her calendar, there was a massive structural contradiction.
The contrast was absolute. Her stated vision was autonomy, revenue generation, and rapid scale. But her operational reality, her day-to-day, hour-by-hour existence, still heavily reflected the employee she used to be. She was operating on a legacy schedule while attempting to build a founder's enterprise.
We need to diagnose the exact symptoms of this, because the data suggests a vast majority of emerging founders experience these exact same operational bottlenecks. The notes list them clearly. Late nights, scattered mornings, no intentional business blocks.
Let's break those down because they're critical.
Late nights usually indicate a founder is using exhaustion as a proxy for efficiency. They think, I'm up until 2 a.m. answering emails, therefore I'm grinding. Scattered mornings indicate a highly reactive state, waking up and immediately letting the demands of the external world dictate the operational flow before any strategic intent is established.
And no intentional business blocks. That means the business is essentially homeless within the calendar. It possesses no dedicated real estate. What's fascinating here is the psychology driving these specific symptoms. A significant percentage of founders, particularly in the early transitional stages, equate a lack of rigid routine with freedom.
The narrative is, I'm leaving the highly structured corporate world. I don't want a rigid calendar anymore. I want to operate intuitively.
Exactly, but a lack of structure isn't a sign of freedom. It's a symptom of a business trapped in an outdated, chaotic container. When a founder exhibits scattered mornings and frantic late-night sprints, they aren't exercising freedom. They're demonstrating a critical lack of operational discipline.
Right, you look at these calendars and see a block labeled strategic planning squeezed tightly between a toddler's doctor appointment and a mandatory corporate HR webinar. That isn't a strategy block. That's a stress-induced daydream.
Precisely. You're allowing your past habits and external obligations to dictate your current operational capacity. True freedom in business is the direct result of incredibly disciplined, intentional architecture. Without those protected, intentional business blocks, your brain never actually registers the business as a primary endeavor. It registers it as a high-friction secondary project.
It becomes a source of guilt rather than a source of momentum. That brings us to the intervention with this specific client. The strategy wasn't to provide a motivational consultation. It was a structural intervention. The team restructured her day to explicitly reflect her next chapter. We didn't arrange her day around her current 9-to-5 limitations. The schedule was realigned to match the operational output of the CEO she needed to become.
The calendar was forced to mirror the future, not the past.
Let's look at what that actually entailed.
Yeah.
What did that hour-by-hour shift look like in practice?
It required aggressive compartmentalization. Prior to the intervention, her mornings were a blend of checking corporate Slack channels, scrolling industry news, and attempting to draft startup emails simultaneously. It was a high-context switching environment, which is terrible for cognitive load.
It just drains your energy before you even start.
Absolutely. So the intervention architected a hard, non-negotiable boundary. From 6:00 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., she was placed in an absolute blackout zone for her corporate job. No Slack, no email. That 90-minute block was structurally dedicated to proactive revenue-generating tasks for her business. The corporate role didn't exist until 8:30 a.m.
And we have to highlight the speed of the result from that specific intervention. The strategy notes point out that within exactly 2 weeks, she reported a fundamental shift. She stated it felt like her business finally had a real chance. 2 weeks. In the lifespan of a scaling company, 14 days is a negligible metric. But the psychological and operational shift was massive. She transitioned from drowning in friction to experiencing quantifiable momentum.
That data point is critical. We want the listener to really anchor onto the fact that her external circumstances didn't change at all. The 9 to 5 didn't disappear, the corporate demands didn't lessen, the macroeconomic environment remained identical.
The only variable altered was her internal scheduling architecture.
Exactly. She stopped waiting for circumstances to permit her to be a founder, and she structurally mandated it through her calendar.
I want to push back on that slightly, though. A cynic might say, well, she just started waking up earlier and working harder. Of course she saw results. Are we saying her corporate job just stopped being demanding, or is there a deeper mechanical reason why that 6:00 a.m. block functions so differently than a 10:00 p.m. block?
It's entirely mechanical. It's not just about working more hours. It's about the quality of the cognitive real estate. A 10:00 p.m. block is reactive and fatigued. You're operating on the depleted reserves left over after the corporate job has extracted its value. A 6:00 a.m. protected block is proactive and prime.
The external world will never voluntarily allocate the high-quality space you require to build something extraordinary.
The world will happily consume every prime minute you offer it. By restructuring her calendar, she erected load-bearing walls. She defended her peak cognitive hours. That's why the business suddenly had a real chance. The friction of the old identity, the identity that gave its best hours to the employer, was systematically removed.
Which perfectly sets up the third major section of today's analysis. Understanding the deep, highly technical difference between being busy and being aligned. The source material provides a very specific warning on this front. The email draft explicitly states you cannot grow into your next chapter while keeping the same exhausting, scattered routines. It's a direct warning against the trap of mere motion.
We need to define being busy in highly technical terms because it's the most common and destructive trap for ambitious founders. Being busy is operating on pure friction. It is the act of retaining tasks, obligations, and administrative bloat that belong to a past operational identity.
When a founder is merely busy, they are generating a massive amount of heat and exhaustion, but they aren't actually creating any forward progression.
They're sprinting on a treadmill, staring at a static wall, but convincing themselves they're scaling a mountain simply because they're sweating. It is motion entirely devoid of momentum.
That's a vital distinction. Motion without momentum. We see founders all the time who are absolutely exhausted by 5 p.m., but when you audit their output, they haven't moved the needle on a single revenue-generating KPI. Contrast that with the definition of being aligned. The documentation defines alignment through the presence of intentional business blocks and a routine that actively honors the future structure of the business.
Being aligned means every allocated hour possesses a specific strategic purpose that serves the ultimate objective. It's not about increasing task volume. It's about executing exactly what's required for the next growth phase.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Alignment is fundamentally about intentionality and resource allocation. It's the deliberate transition from those scattered, highly reactive mornings we analyzed earlier to heavily protected, proactive execution. When a founder is aligned, they aren't waking up and checking their inbox to see what the market wants from them today. They are waking up and executing on predetermined business blocks that they have ruthlessly protected from outside interference.
alignment is quiet, highly focused, and incredibly efficient. Busy is loud, chaotic, and ultimately destructive to long-term operational health.
Exactly. To achieve that alignment, the strategy text details 3 direct, undeniable operational commands. These are the 3 pillars of architecting space.
Pillar number 1, remove what no longer fits. Pillar number 2, add what supports your business. Pillar number 3, protect what matters. Let's break these down thoroughly, starting with the first pillar, removing what no longer fits. This is about identifying and eliminating the dead weight of the legacy routine. But how do we do that without destabilizing the founder's current income source?
This is often the most resistant pillar for founders to implement. Psychologically, high achievers are wired to accumulate, to add more software, more meetings, more theoretical tactics. But when you are architecting space, the first required step is demolition. You have to audit the calendar and ruthlessly identify the habits, the recurring sinks, the low-leverage administrative tasks that are artifacts of the person you used to be. We often recommend a framework like an energy ROI audit.
All right, let's detail that framework because that's highly actionable. The energy ROI audit.
You look at your calendar and you code tasks by cognitive drain versus revenue generation. If a task requires high cognitive energy but yields zero revenue or strategic advancement, like attending a mandatory camera-on corporate town hall that doesn't impact your department, that's a prime candidate for removal or minimization. If a task isn't directly contributing to the escape velocity required to leave the 9 to 5 or the direct scaling of the enterprise, it's dead weight. It's a structural anchor.
You physically cannot insert new high-value operations into a schedule that is already at maximum capacity with obsolete actions.
But again, to play devil's advocate, a founder might say, I can't just skip the corporate town hall. I'll get fired before my business is ready to sustain me. How do they navigate the reality of corporate expectations while executing this demolition phase?
By understanding the difference between performance and optics. Often, founders over-deliver in areas of their legacy job that require zero over-delivery. They attend the town hall and actively take notes, rather than having it on in the background while they execute a lower-tier business task. It's about finding the structural inefficiencies in the legacy job and exploiting them to claw back cognitive space. It's a calculated reallocation of effort.
That leads directly to the second pillar. Add what supports your business. Once a founder has successfully cleared out that dead weight, they don't just leave that space empty to be filled by random distractions or dopamine loops. They have to structure intentional business time. This is where the high-leverage activities are inserted: strategic planning, product development, aggressive client acquisition.
But the notes make it clear. You don't just write these on a separate to-do list. You hard-code them into the central calendar. They become non-negotiable appointments with your future operational self.
Correct. And that insertion is completely useless without the rigorous enforcement of the third pillar. Protect what matters. This is where the actual operational battle takes place. A founder can remove the old tasks, they can beautifully color code the new strategic blocks, but if they don't aggressively guard that new schedule against the habits of the past, the system reverts to baseline within days. The external environment is going to test those new boundaries constantly.
The old 9-to-5 mindset is going to attempt to creep into those dedicated business blocks.
Give me an example of that mindset creep. What does that look like in real time?
It looks like rationalization. It's Tuesday morning during a protected business block, and you think, well, my boss just sent an email marked urgent. I'll just handle this one corporate issue quickly, then get back to my business strategy. That is a failure to protect what matters.
Protecting what matters means treating those intentional blocks with the exact same reverence and immovability you would treat a sit-down meeting with a Tier 1 venture capitalist. You don't reschedule a VC meeting because a minor corporate email arrived. You build an absolute fortress around that protected time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How do we actually transition these macro theories into immediate execution today? The strategy gives us a highly tactical mechanism for generating immediate momentum through subtraction. It's highlighted in the short-form video script and serves as the core directive. Remove just one task today that belongs to the past. It doesn't demand that a founder overhaul their entire life architecture by tomorrow morning. It asks for a single, highly precise act of extraction.
Let's analyze the operational physics of why the strategy mandates starting with removal rather than addition. As we established, you cannot grow into a next-level operational chapter if the current container is filled to capacity. If a founder's calendar is currently operating at 100% utilization with 9 to 5 settling habits, attempting to layer a new complex business strategy on top of it will instantly trigger overwhelming friction and system failure. The vacuum must be created first.
But what if they pick the wrong task to remove? What if they eliminate something that was actually holding a piece of their routine together?
The specific task matters less than the assertion of agency. By removing just one useless task, perhaps it's a completely pointless 30-minute recurring sync that could be an email, or perhaps it's 45 minutes of undirected scrolling before bed. You prove to yourself that your schedule isn't a fixed, immutable law of physics. You prove that the calendar is malleable. You prove you possess structural agency.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming territory. And then you execute the second half of that directive. Replace the removed task with one that actively builds the enterprise. You clear the space, and then you immediately occupy it with a growth asset. You swap a friction-heavy anchor for a momentum-generating engine. It's a one-for-one operational exchange that fundamentally alters the trajectory of the day.
This represents the exact physics of the strategy summarized in the text. Alignment creates momentum. Momentum doesn't generate from massive, unsustainable, caffeine-fueled bursts of frantic energy over a single weekend. It generates from the continuous daily alignment of operational actions with strategic goals. When you make that single swap, removing a legacy habit and replacing it with a strategic business action, you instantly transition from a state of static friction to a state of forward motion.
You've changed the polarity of the schedule. It's no longer pulling you backward into the corporate mindset. It's actively pushing you forward into the founder mindset. And once that momentum is established, it compounds highly efficiently.
It's the ultimate proof of concept. You stop fighting the drag of your old life and start utilizing the tailwind of your new architecture. This is exactly why the documentation insists that updating your schedule to honor your future is an active daily requirement. It isn't a set it and forget it calendar trick. You're constantly auditing, constantly extracting inefficiencies, constantly realigning the blocks to match the expanding scale of the business.
Because the business demands it.
This raises an important question, one that everyone analyzing the session needs to answer right now, relying on absolute objective honesty. We've established the schedule is an unforgiving mirror. So if you were forced to hand your current actual calendar to an external investor today, what would the data tell them? Would they see the rigorous operational blueprint of a business that's legitimately scaling toward independence? Or would they see the chaotic, highly fragmented calendar of a side hobby that's desperately attempting to survive alongside a dominant 9-to-5 operational mindset? You can't fake a calendar. The architecture of your day is the absolute only tangible proof of your ambition.
If you're ready to align your schedule with your future business, visit 365 Freedom online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.